and welcome to my messy pantry. Today I'm going to organize my pantry because, as you can see, it's a freaking mess. We are starting our new 30-day challenge for this month, and it heavily involves my pantry and the food that we're consuming. So I want to make sure that we're starting off on the right foot. I've done a couple of different things in here already to try and keep this room organized, but we have these metal wire shelves, and of course things like to fall through them, and they're not the best for standing bottles and stuff on. So I went to the Dollar Tree and picked up some of these these white wash bins and just a few white trays. We're not sure exactly how many we're going to need or what we're going to use, but I'm just going to go ahead and start organizing.
So what I started doing was just getting everything off of the wire shelves and throwing it in some bins, kind of based on where it was already. I then took all the cleaning supplies out and moved it to a different location in my home just to avoid any kind of cross-contamination. These are just normal things I use for parties, just trying to get them out of the way in that big blue bucket. The dog food and stuff was kind of tucked away in a corner, so I decided to move it over so it was more easily accessible. And this is just all the other dog accessories, and then the gray bin has dog treats and medicine and stuff, so it's easy to access, and it's all together, which just makes much more sense. So then I moved the cookbooks down just because we don't use them as often as we use regular ingredients, of course, so just putting them in a spot that still makes sense but is not taking up as much important real estate on my shelves. I did try and use these gray buckets to organize my pantry before, but the roundness of the buckets just didn't make sense with the shelves, and these white bins seem to be working a lot better. So when you're pulling everything out and organizing it by category, you really want to make sure that you're checking the expiration dates on everything. In our pantry, I noticed I have so many different kinds of nuts, and this bin was almost too small for everything. So I was double checking, triple checking all of the dates on everything to make sure that everything I had was still good. So here it's a little bit more complicated because I'm separating out the ingredients that are compliant on the new eating plan versus the ingredients that I would use to cook just a standard everyday meal and baking supplies. So I decided at this point that I was going to move the baking supplies up with the actual baking tools. So I'm putting all of the baking ingredients in this bin here. Most of it's in Ziploc baggies, so I'm not too worried about it being spilled or anything like that in this fabric bin. I had so many random things in here in the pantry, so giving everything a home in these white bins is actually going to help keep people from just putting random crap all over the shelves in my pantry, hopefully. Cross my fingers. What's going on here is I had a ton of glass bottles back there in that corner because I was trying to keep them from falling off the shelves. And so I put them in the buckets and I organized them by vinegars and by oils because I noticed I had a ton of different kinds of vinegars and a ton of different kinds of oils. The categories that I do mine in are definitely not the categories that everybody's pantry is going to need to be, but you really just kind of want to look at what you have and what makes sense for your family and the way that you cook. I noticed this corner space, which was pretty inaccessible just because of how deep the shelves are. I could use that to store some of the things that I didn't use as often. So the food dehydrator and the baking pans are all moving into the corner since I don't use them as often as I use some other things. So all of the baking tools are now on the same shelf and they're organized neatly and out of the way, but also still easily accessible when I need them. The other thing that I put on that shelf was any candy or gum or things like that that I didn't necessarily want to keep with the snacks because I didn't want them as easily accessible to Emerson as the snacks that I'd rather him eat on a daily basis. So now those are up and out of the way. On this next shelf down, I started noticing that I was putting all of the cooking things, the things that I actually use to cook with, on these shelves. So I had that little pouch hanging from the side of the rack, and it just didn't make sense to be there. And everything that was in it ended up actually being expired because nobody really would look there for those snacks. So I had to throw all of that out. So moving that into a bin and putting it there on the shelf where people can see what's in those things makes it so much more sense. One of the things that you can do for your canned beverages is use the clear trays from the Dollar Tree that are made for canned goods. But I just put the canned beverages in there as well, just to make it a little more compact. Play around with the placement of your objects that aren't in bins and the bins themselves to see what works best for you, how you would grab things if you were coming in for specific ingredients. It does take a couple of different tries to make sure that you're getting everything where you want it, but just play around with it and figure out what makes sense for you and for your family. So in trying to figure out what else to put on this bottom shelf that I used pretty often, and based on the fact that I needed to make room in some other areas of the kitchen and the pantry, I decided to put the crock pots down low because I do use them quite often, but they're difficult to get out of the cabinet that I had them in. So I did put them down there on the bottom shelf, as well as moved all of the glass containers that I use for parties down to the bottom shelf as well, behind those buckets to keep them from falling off the shelf when the door slams shut. I love these little pockets that you can hang from the wire pantry shelves, and I used a few of them. One of them has some instruction manuals for things that are in the kitchen and some takeout menus and things like that. And the other one just has some snacks like popcorn and some flat snacks that just pack better in a pocket.
So it's a few days later, and we've been using the pantry the way that it is, and it seems to be working for us. So what I did do was bring in the rest of my day of the week bins here to help with the meal planning a little bit. And I just wanted to go ahead and label the rest of the white bins because right now it's kind of boring.
Dollar Tree carries two different colored bins, the white and the black, and I chose the white ones only because I knew that it would be cheaper to just write on them and that I had the capability of doing so. Here I'm just kind of writing out whatever I decided to use that actual bucket for. You'll notice I did pull the extra one from the water bottles because it was impossible to write on it while everything was in it. So I'm just kind of swapping out as I go.
Okay, so I know that you guys have been just watching me bust out these labels like nobody's business. I'm going to show you real quick how I fake it because I don't want you to think that I'm like this perfect handwriting person, okay? So honestly, and this is going to be a long one. I should have done it with a shorter one, but I just had this thought. So I'm just going to write like I normally would write. Let's see if you can, here, I'll step away so you can see it a little bit. This is going to be a really long one. So what I do is I actually write each letter individually. I'm not like writing it out like I would handwriting. I'm actually writing every individual letter. Let me see if I spelled that right. I'm not doing it like I'm writing a note to somebody and just like writing out. I am writing each individual letter as its own piece of art necessarily. So I'm thinking of the shape of what I want it to look like versus, oh, this is the letter P. Okay. So let me write the other word that I'm working on. And don't worry if it is crooked, because if you can see this, my cooking word goes like that, okay? Nobody's going to be perfect. It's not going to look like the hand lettering books. It is what it is. Now I'm going to show you how I fake the like hand lettering shadows. Anything that would be considered a downstroke. So like the N, I come down, then I go up and I come back down. So anything that's considered a downstroke, thicken it. All I'm doing is drawing an extra line on the outside of whatever that downstroke is and filling in any white. I hope you can see this. So anything that is a downstroke gets an extra little bit of love. So this comes up and goes down. This goes down. It's hard to do when I'm like looking at it from this angle. But that's how you fake it. So that's how you fake it. Now there is something that you'll notice here when we are doing the writing on the bins, that this is not centered. So the A is centered, but this part is not, and it really kind of bothered me. So I just added a little graphic. You'll notice I did the same thing to Saturday. Saturday was not centered, so I just threw a little graphic on there. Just have fun with it. So I actually came to a separate space to work on this next part. This is our first aid supplies and all of our medication. So the reason I keep this in my pantry is because while we do have a few different medicine cabinets around the house, we do utilize that space for other things. And I just feel having all of the medicine and first aid supplies in one location actually makes it easier. If you have small children or pets that climb, I of course don't recommend keeping your medicine and your first aid supplies where they can be easily accessed. And the second thing is, we don't take any prescription drugs in this house, so there's really nothing in here that could really cause anybody a lot of harm. Just make sure that you're educating your family on proper handling of medications and stuff like that. And of course, if you do have super powerful or prescription drugs, you do keep those in a separate location locked away from your children and your pets. So I'm gonna go ahead and sort this out and restock my first aid kits.
So the first thing I'm doing is actually checking for expiration dates. With first aid supplies, it's very important to check all of your expiration dates and make sure that you're not giving your family expired medicines or Band-Aids where the adhesive is expired and things like that. So you just want to double check everything. And then I'm just sorting through all of the different bags that I have to see what's in them, what needs to be added to them, and going from there just to make sure that everything has what it needs in case of just a small first aid emergency. Now, once all of the first aid kits have been stocked with everything that they need, I went through and organized the clear tray that I was using based on the kind of supplies that I had.
The pantry is finally done, and I wanted to give you a little tour and show you exactly what we did and why we did it. We did wait a few days for me to actually finalize everything and where everything was, because I wanted to make sure that logistically it was going to work for us. So I checked with my husband and my son, and of course making dinner the last few days, just making sure that everything was in a good accessible place that made sense, because before it did not make sense. So just a reminder, this is what it looked like before, and this is what it looks like now. I'm gonna go through and show you what I did, why I did it. First off, I actually finished setting up this meal planning, meal prep area here. There's a bucket up here for every day of the week. You can see clearly that there's only 5 buckets up here because there's only room for 5 right now. Typically, there are 2 days a week where I either am serving leftovers or something's happening and we're just not home and we have to eat out. So those days are not up here, and I have a bin for every day, so I can kind of swap out the ones that I need. I flipped my baking shelf. So I had all of the all of the baking pans on this end, but of course they didn't get used as much again, so I moved them to the corner. So, hey monkey, goldfish. You want goldfish? There you go. So it makes it a lot easier to come in and get the things that you need. Obviously, you knew exactly where that was. So what I've done is, again, moved the cake pans here, and the other baking supplies are all up here. I had baking supplies in a different location, but it didn't make sense to keep them down here because I don't use them all the time. So again, I put all of the baking stuff on one shelf, even if it's ingredients and not necessarily just supplies. So the next shelf down, which is this shelf here, this is all ingredients that you'd use for regular meal prep. The next shelf is the snack and lunch shelf. This is kind of the easy grab and go for meals and stuff when we're going to work and to school. So my son has already had this system for a little while. This is his meal prep system. They're just 5 little snappy bins that snap together, and he can kind of meal prep his own things. Thank you guys for helping me organize my pantry. I hope you really enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. If you like this video and want to see more like it, please subscribe. And make sure to click that little bell icon so that you get notified when I post a new video every week. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.